the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
This is actually the 100th anniversary of this convention. It began 100 years ago in Cincinnati, so there's a historical component of that, but also it's significant when they reached out to us and we're hearing more about Cincinnati's story, and a big piece of that is the ongoing renaissance that's ongoing throughout the region.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. In 1914, the new United States Chamber assembled the leaders of local chambers for their first convention right here in Cincinnati. This week, 100 years later, nearly 1,000 local chamber leaders have returned to Cincinnati for their centennial convention. Cincinnati President William Howard Taft once observed that lots of tiny towns in America don't have any commerce or trade to speak of, but they all have a chamber of commerce. One of the most basic functions of a chamber is to be a booster, to sing the praises of their community. You can hear that in the words of Lance Berry, the spokesman for the Cincinnati Chamber.
It's influence, it's prestige. To have these top-level people come here, they could have gone anywhere, but to come to Cincinnati and see what we are now and what we no longer were 10, 20, 30 years ago is significant. And these people are going to go back to their cities that they represent, and they're going to say, hey, Cincinnati really has it going on. We need to talk more about what they're doing there in Southwest Ohio.
Chambers of Commerce are among the oldest and most prolific voluntary organizations in America. The Cincinnati Chamber dates to 1839 and is celebrating its 175th anniversary year. And this week, in conjunction with the National Convention, a comprehensive history of the role of chambers of commerce in the United States has been released. The title, The Magicians of Main Street, was written by Chris Mead, the vice president and of the Association of Chambers of Commerce Executives, ACCE. And Chris is with us this morning. And Chris, welcome to Cincinnati. We're taping on Friday. Your convention is going to end later today, and I hope it's been a good week.
It's been a great week, Dan, and we're glad we came here. We just love Cincinnati. We love the buildings, the bridges, the heritage here, and I get a kick of some of the chamber stories. I was working on this book. I remember one time the chamber building burned down, and chamber board members actually were taking people out of the
Actually, we
ashes.
have a photo, and we can get
really?
that up, of that building, which was at the corner of 4th and Vine Streets, and it was a terrible fire while people were in the building, and I think 6 people were killed. The other side of that story, there it is, a huge building. The other side of that story is the chamber, a business organization, had so underinsured the building that it was impossible to rebuild it. So they had to just abandon it. It's been in office buildings ever since. But yes, it's really lots of fascinating local stories here. Now I was in Skyline yesterday, and it was next to a group of people who were at the convention from Georgia, and they were being introduced into our local food, and I shared with them that my definition of anybody who comes to Cincinnati, who moves here, in order to be a true Cincinnatian, you have to crave Cincinnati chili at least once a week. Not just eat it, but crave it. So before you leave, you got to eat it. So as you did this history, this really substantial history of the Chambers of Commerce, which takes it from 1768, the founding of the first chamber, to 1945, so the end of World War II. What would you say that you discovered were the real primary functions of a Chamber of Commerce?
The first thing that jumped into my head when you asked that is transportation. If there's a bridge that's got a problem, they want it fixed. If they got a harbor, they want it deepened. And I hate to say it, but the chamber members can't pay for it. They need government to help them, so they're often working with government to get these things done. But here's an example: Los Angeles. They were an amazing chamber. They had almost nothing. The place was falling apart in a depression in the 1880s. They got it going. There were 18 inches of water in the harbor, and they went to Uncle Sam and said, "We want a port. Help us out." And somehow it became, the greatest port on the West Coast. Houston, kind of similar.
So sometimes I think people would think that the chamber, to listen to lots of pronouncements, is always for small government, always for getting government not, certainly not taxes, but certainly getting government to not do as much as it does. But you're saying that on a local level, in fact, that's frequently not the case.
If it's if it's something that business needs or wants, or that you need to do business well, they want it. Generally speaking, but they also are watchdogs, and there are examples through the history. There was a tax revolt in South Carolina, led by two chambers from Charleston, South Carolina, and one of them led by the guy who was Rhett Butler, the model for Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, 1871. So that was essentially a tax revolt. And another example, Boss Tweed in New York City, the New York Chamber was pretty significantly behind getting him out of power.
So when you talk about the chambers all over the country, and what are we up to? How many chambers do you count right now?
Well, there's a directory that has about plus 7,000 plus, maybe 4,000 with a full-time employee.
Okay, so we're talking significant numbers of chambers.
Yes.
William Hart Taft's comment. Chambers everywhere. On the local level, a chamber in one place might be taking a position that's different than a chamber in someplace else.
Yes.
They're looking at local issues, and they're responding to local issues and local needs, which may bring them sometimes into conflict with each other in some theoretical way.
Yes, and there are also levels. Like the local chamber may love a fairly liberal representative who got them the bridge or got them, the highway. Meanwhile, the U.S. Chamber or the state chamber may feel entirely differently about that elected official. So there can be conflicts. It's inevitable, right, in our society.
By the way, you've mentioned a bridge a couple of times. I can't resist. Have you been talking to people about the issue right now about building a new interstate bridge here?
I don't know anything about it.
You don't know anything about it? Yeah, well, talk to the people at the Cincinnati Chamber or the Northern Kentucky Chamber, and you'll hear a lot about that.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's interesting that was the first thing that you brought up. So there are these local chambers, but then there's the United States Chamber. And one of the things that I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about is Cincinnati has a connection to that too. The founding of the United States Chamber, lots of people involved in this. A movement